I'm Rick from Cartouche Classic Cars. On this video, we're back on the 70 Monte Carlo, and it's the night before we're gonna sandblast. We decided to go ahead and just prep everything tonight to get a good jump on tomorrow. As you can see, it's getting dark, but we're gonna hit the car early in the morning. That will give us all day to hopefully sandblast it, let it dry, and then maybe ideally on the same day epoxy it primer. So put it in epoxy primer. So what I did between the last video and this video, you could see we did on the last video put the car, we took the body off the frame that was mounted to a frame jig, we added on this rotisserie with these supports so we don't try to bend the body, since we did cut a lot off the car. I did, since the last video to this video, remove all the undercoating with heat, wire brush on a drill and a scraper. You can see the car looks a lot different. I'm already seeing a couple signs of some holes poking through the floor pan on the undercoating. I also did remove all the seam sealer. Between the undercoating and the seam sealer, that's the stuff that even with a good sandblast pot, it'll sit there and it doesn't get under the E-coat, not the E-coat, the undercoating. It almost absorbs it. Same thing with the seam sealer and the sand. It just starts eating material and wastes time. So it's easier for us to just use heat, a wire brush with the seam sealer and the undercoat, and save the owner time on the blast process. So what I also did off camera in between the last video and this video was we acid washed after stripping and DA sanding the roof structure, both the top and bottom. You can see once we ended up stripping it on the last video with the SCT, we did expose some rust pitting on where the DA sander and the SCT couldn't get in. So the acid wash will get in there, we're able to wash it out with the Scotch-Brite, and then we're able to, it'll turn it to a good etching primer. So when this car tomorrow is ready for epoxy, we'll DA scuff the roof one more time, and we'll go ahead and start with the epoxy phase. So that pretty much covers the car. I will say I did that we were gonna sandblast the trunk completely. That last time that we're gonna cut off the trunk. On this video, we are gonna go ahead and just sandblast the trunk. It's only that much more. We'll go ahead and hit it, and then the owner and I will make a decision once the trunk is in complete bare metal state, and then we could decide whether to replace the trunk or not. I didn't do anything with removing the undercoat from the inner fenders. They're so rusted out, and then this whole area, it's just, that was gonna be wasting time. So again, this car will be sandblasted, epoxy primed on this video, and then the next video we'll go down for a second round of undercoating. We're also gonna look at this car at the end of the video and see if the sandblasting does find any more rust holes, weak metal, things like that. That's what the job is of the sandblaster. So let's take a look at the sandblast pot we're going to use. So we're using the EcoQuip EQ600 wet blast system. So this uses hydraulic pressure to pressurize the pot. A lot of wet systems, if you've seen my video, I've explained this, a lot of other wet blasting systems use water inside, and the air inside the pot, and water picks up the air and it gets they get added together in the blast hose. This one uses pneumatic pressure from the diesel air compressor to run a hydraulic pump to then put water to hydraulically pressurize this pot. It basically, in layman's sense, makes it a little more efficient. I'll use about 2/3 the amount of sand on this pot, and it comes out a lot smoother than a wet system, as far as, you know, you can adjust everything a lot more precise for the amount of material you're using and all that. It's also a little bit healthier, and it just puts more of a mist on there. So saying that, people have different opinions on how to strip a car. So you have chemical stripping, you have mechanical stripping, which we did some of that, and then you have the wet or dry sandblasting. So the reason we're not chemically stripping, one, I will say I have never worked on a car that's been chemically stripped as of today. ask, a lot of customers do ask me about it, and I pretty much tell them, you know, I think this owner was one of them that he was thinking about going the chemical stripping route, and I said, if you want to try it, go for it. I mean, I try not to get involved with other companies, because every time we seem like we do, something happens and then I have to end up fixing it. So we talked about it. The chemical stripping, I feel, is great. It does remove everything. It is a little more costly. However, when you sit there and you remove all the coating from certain areas that we can't get to, now you have bare metal on a bunch of inner structures, all that stuff. And what I worry about is years down the road that we don't get this, and we're talking about panels that butt on top of each other. All the seams there now are bare metal. Now, saying that, some of the cars from the factory are also bare metal. So I'm not saying that that's, you know, the end all thing. But what I worry about is even the high-end dipping companies, they pay a lot more money. They can put like an E-coat that they dip the whole car in some kind of vat. It still doesn't get in all the parts. We could see that from our new aftermarket parts we buy. A lot of pieces we pull off, there's bare metal everywhere. So that's just one thing I worry about the dipping process. And then two, I can't regulate it. So if there is a problem with the car, I become the middleman, and it just is more hassle than it's worth. We have the ability at this shop to wet blast the car, dry blast the car, so that's what we're going to do. The reason we have both a wet blast system and a dry blast system and a giant blast cabinet is because, again, we've tried different blasters, and when we get involved with other people, the car gets ruined. The job never comes out right. Right now, with having our own equipment here, and this is another reason why I believe the owner of the Monte Carlo chose to have me blast the car, that I could sit there when it's ready. It was ready today. We pull it outside, we watch the weather. On a good day, we can schedule the blasting, and tomorrow, same day, get it in epoxy primer. We have full control. I'm not worried about messing up the car, and I'm not worried about adding more work onto it. But, so saying that, with the wet blast system, the main thing on the wet blasting is you need to make sure the sand gets out of the car. It's easier on the car a little bit as far as the water kind of easing some of the pressure, especially with this one, that you're adding it at such a consistent rate and it's more precise. Saying that, the main thing is if you do not get the sand out of the car, rockers, other areas, that's why on this car, if you see, we removed the deck filler panel, removed the cowl panel, the side panels, all area that the sand is going to get trapped in. You'll see we will wash this whole thing out when it's done. This system has its own wash down phase. The main thing too on the wet blasting, the most important thing is you need a rust inhibitor. We're going to use Express Blast. That's our go-to rust inhibitor. I've used Hold Tight 102 before. They work really good. Basically, it's a rust inhibitor and metal conditioner and a surface prep. So it's going to get the metal ready for the epoxy primer. So and with the dry blasting system, the reason I don't use the dry blasting system so much is just for my health, things like that on the car. It makes a huge mess. Dust goes everywhere. It's harder on the car itself. So I'm saying there are certain projects you'll see that if they keep certain areas, and we're worried about not getting the sand out in the wet system, because the wet system, if you don't get the sand out, it turns like a beach sand. If you've ever been to the beach and you see how that sand dries and it's almost like concrete, that's what ends up in your car if you can't get it out. So if we have a project that we know we have to keep certain parts on the car where we know that sand's gonna clump in, dry blasting is an option. So stay tuned. Tomorrow morning, we're going to start filling this up, get the rest of the hoses hooked up. Like I said, we left the car out tonight. As you could see, it's on the rotisserie. I don't think anyone's going to steal it. It's going to be more hassle than it's worth. One more thing on the wet system. You can see behind me, we're using a diesel 185 compressor. So it's 185 cubic feet per minute diesel compressor. It's a screw compressor, so it's got 100% duty cycle. I get this question all the time asked to me through email, Facebook, on YouTube, that, okay, well, what's the best sandblast pot, or what's a cheaper version of this pot that I can use? And there are a lot cheaper versions and something that you can do in your own, your own house. And I have sandblasted with smaller pots. Saying that, the sandblasting really comes down, and it's only going to be good as your air compressor. If you're running a 19 CFM compressor, one, you have to regulate your nozzle side based on your compressor flow. So right here with this one, we're running a 1/2-inch nozzle with the 185. Talking to blasting experts in the blasting company, that's what balances out between the two of them. This blaster right here can run a 185 CFM compressor up to a 450 CFM compressor. So if I went with a 450 CFM compressor, if I had one, we would increase our nozzle side to 3/4 or 5/8. It would get the job done faster, but it would also use more material, et cetera, and not be as precise. So that's some things on the blasting and the basics. If you're going to try to go at home, one, you need to make sure there's no moisture in your pot, in your dry pot. Obviously the wet pot would be a little bit different, but moisture will start clogging out the sand. And two, you need the flow rate of the compressor. So realistically, I mean, even 35 CFM, 30 CFM, it's really, I think actually I would say the shop has a 30 CFM sandblaster, and I'm using, I believe it's a 1/4-inch nozzle on the blast cabinet, and that does do well. That's also a screw compressor. So if you get around the 20 CFM, that's where you're going to start having issues, and then you got to look at your duty cycle. So sorry to make that a little bit longer, but that's a question I get asked all the time on the blasting. So let's get to this. Like I said, as you can see, it's getting dark. We have everything pre-positioned. I'll come out tomorrow. We'll fill up the blast pot, connect all the hoses, and when the sun's up, we'll start the blasting process. It'll be a long day, but hopefully at the end of it, if all goes well, that Monte Carlo will be sitting in epoxy primer. So stay tuned, and I'll see you tomorrow.
So starting off the next day, you can see the sun is coming up. It's still a little bit early in the day, being a little bit cold. So we're going to just go ahead and prep the blast equipment right now because, obviously spraying these cars, and you're going to see during the video, I'm going to be soaking wet. All the blast back coming back with the water, and every groove you hit, it'll hit the shield and everything. So realistically, I try to shoot for a day that's going to be really comfortable. In the summertime, it's not that bad, but in the wintertime, I really have to pick and choose when we blast and when we don't blast. More power to someone that does this every day, and I'm sure there's certain equipment to keep you warm and dry at the same time. We don't have that here at this shop, so we just, like I said, as many times as I blast a year, we just pick a nice day to blast, and then we move on from there. So starting out the video, you can see I added the Express Blast water conditioner. There's going to be a certain ratio for the well water that we're using now versus if you have city water. But we added that, we followed the directions on that versus how much water we have. Then we're using a medium grit recycled crushed glass as our media. Do not use beach sand, all that stuff. I mean, we have a very good sandblast dealer about 30-45 minutes away from here. That's all they do is sandblast. So we have a selection of variable media, everything else at our disposal. I usually tell them what we're doing, but most of the time we're blasting the same thing. These car bodies, it's all the same stuff. So the medium grit crushed glass seems to work the best. As you could see in the video, the sandblaster with the medium crushed glass is really removing the material off the car and getting it down to bare metal very efficiently. Saying that, the video is time-lapse 10 times faster than it normally is. So obviously, if you slow this down, this process was still taking hours and hours to just do this whole floor pan. What you're doing, you're holding the sandblaster in one spot and you're moving just very slow. See, I kind of do change my angle of attack as I'm sandblasting. It's not as crucial on the bottom. What it does help dig out from under the material and remove the sand better. And it's also going to stop some of the blast back coming, the water hitting me in my face mask. So if you see me get off screen, basically the water hit the face mask, I can't see anymore, so we go back and I dip the face shield in a bucket of water, clean it off, and then we try again. But that's where I'm coming at different angles of attack. One, to make sure we also get the different grooves and everything else. If you don't hit the backside of one of these braces, the floor pans aren't just straight. So we're getting at every angle to try to make sure we we minimize the amount of areas that we miss. What I did for the inside of the floor pan, I found it a lot better now that I had the car on the rotisserie. I don't do too many on the rotisserie, which we've seen. I've actually decided on the inside to just blast the bottom side of the floor pan and then turn the car over and keep blasting on the bottom again. While you're holding your hands over your head with this giant blast hose, you get really fatigued, and the water has a better chance of coming and blasting back at the same height you're holding the hose. As you're blasting down, I found out a lot better that it'll just keep going down, and the process just gets a little bit smoother. But as you can see, for the whole bottom of this car, it's really coming out really clean. Now that we're done with the bottom of the car, we're going to turn our attention to the side of this Monte Carlo. I try with the sandblasting to come up with a certain process so we don't miss anything. So it's hard to see in the video, but as the sand's being sprayed in there on the wet blaster, it's a lot different on the dry blaster. That beach sand, actually, when it's wet, it almost looks like rust. So it's kind of hard to keep track of what you've already done and what's just sand blowing around. There's a couple areas I'll go back and hit and then realize it was just sand blowing apart. So the idea, what I try to do, I come up with a plan on the car, and it depends on how we're blasting the car, i.e. a rotisserie here, and I start in one area. Like you could see, I start with the firewall. I work my way through the whole bottom of the car. I know that whole bottom of the car is done. Then you can already see, while the car was still up and down, I went on the inside of the car and worked the bottom of the floor pan. Then I decided to finish out with the sides. As you can see from this video right now, we're in the wash down phase. I kind of have the mask off and everything else. We're just spraying water, but you see what I'm talking about, how everything with the sands kind of got that brownish tint. This is where you want to spend tons of time making sure every part of the car is cleaned out. I'll wash this car down 4 or 5 times, keep rotating it, keep going back through, because you're just, some of the sand, especially when these cars are full of bodies, like they have all their panels on it, they're just trying to hold the sand in certain areas. So the rotisserie also really helped to be able to spin it around, make sure everything's coming out of all the gaps, and just, you could see how much nicer the car's coming out now that we're doing the wash down phase. You could also see that water conditioner, how it kind of has that bubbling effect. It's almost like soap bubbles on there. What it's supposed to do, as soon as it dries, it's supposed to dry the car for paint prep. You could also see what I was saying earlier in the video about we want to blast on a really nice day, because you could see with these cover walls, they're covered in sand, they're covered in water, I'm soaking wet. Now that we're completely done with the blasting and the wash down phase, I'll come back through with just the air compressor itself, and we're going to try to help all this stuff dry by just blowing out all the car and the crevices, just to help stop our blast rusting phase. So that completes the blasting process of this Monte Carlo.
So it's been a long day in sandblasting. We got the car back inside, out of elements. You can see the whole idea here is really to blow everything off, wash it down, spend the time. We are gonna wait till tomorrow to get it in epoxy primer. The good thing about the express blast is I have 72 hours before the car will start flash rusting. We also, in between the primer, we'll have to DA sand. You can see how the roof kind of has that greenish tint. That's the acid reacting with the water. So we'll DA sand that whole area. Again, it's a water conditioner, so it shouldn't make it rust or anything else. We acid treat it for the reasons I told you. Looking at the trunk though, really the trunk area blasted out a whole lot better than what I thought. I'm gonna start looking and see what patches they offer for this car, and then talk to the owner, because this car might not need a full trunk. You can see we did not blast the wheel houses, but looking underneath the car, this was a really big job. Front to rear, this car is bare metal. There's a couple spots here or there where we skipped over with the blaster, and this is a lot of stuff to blast. We're not super worried about it. The main thing, I'll do a one over, make sure there's no rust. If there's a couple area with paint and everything else, again, we're gonna epoxy over it. The main thing was get most of the actual paint, filler, everything off of it. Also, you can see there's a couple spots where there is still some seam sealer left on the car. I focus mostly on the seam sealer on the floor. There's a couple jam areas and everything that, again, we are gonna have to get to. So looking at it, there was a couple surprises in the floor. I mean, you kind of saw the pitting happening, so it's not the end of the world. We are gonna need some more patches. I'm gonna, again, talk to the owner, see what they make for this car, see what we're gonna custom make. Really, this is a very solid car. I mean, realistically, the firewall looks really good. Like I said, we might end up doing an upper cowl. There's some things we're gonna think about. So again, everything was washed out, blown off. We are not gonna touch the car with our bare hands until epoxy primer gets put on the car. We'll get it in the booth right after this. The first thing we're gonna do, like I said, is we're gonna DA the roof. We're gonna go ahead and I'm gonna start spraying certain areas with weld through primer that I know I'm gonna have to weld. The reason is it'll be easier now to start adding weld through primer to those areas, and instead of trying to take belt sanders and stuff and taking epoxy primer off. If we miss an area, it's not the end of the world, but that's kind of idea. So again, car's looking really good. Let's get to the work with the DA sander first thing tomorrow morning. We'll get this thing sprayed in less than 24 hours. And the good thing about letting it sit overnight, if there is a couple areas that a little bit of water has been sitting, that it won't blow out in the paint gun. Sometimes if we rush right to the priming stage, that, you get a couple water spots in it from blowing the water out. So car will dry overnight and we'll get to it tomorrow.
So fast forward the afternoon of the next day. What I came in the next morning early and I told you I was going to do with the roof, I decided to go ahead and we stripped down both sides of the roof skin again. We removed everything. We got that really clean. I also went through this whole car and I got most of the seam sealer off in certain areas. I can really see it now that everything else around the car was sandblasted, and we just cleaned up a bunch of edges. There were some other areas we DA sanded that, the paint wasn't removed all the way, so I scuffed up those areas. We got them to just ensure a proper epoxy coat adhesion. Then we went through, I did taping after I did the weld through primer, like I said earlier, in all the areas I know we're gonna have to work on. Right now we're gonna spray a black Omni 172 epoxy on this car. You can see we're in the paint booth, so I mean, you're not gonna get a show quality job no matter how good job we did cleaning this car, washing it down. There's always going to be sand coming out of that. But as you could see, the car now has been dried 24 hours. We brought it out of the paint booth. You could see the areas that we left in our weld through primer. They really show up on the black. The paint, the epoxy is completely dry to the touch, and now we can go ahead and get the car off the rotisserie, and we're going to do the reverse process of what we started doing in the prep for the sandblasting and put the car back on the frame jig itself. The first step in this process obviously is going to be put the lift under the car and support the car weight itself by the lift arms. Then what I'm going to go ahead and do, I also have my rotisserie locked down straight where it's not going to twist or anything. And then I'm going to go ahead and cut off the arms itself from the rotisserie. So the arms are going to come up with the car body. What that's going to allow us to do, this is the exact opposite we did when we installed the arms and this whole process, if you remember that. That's going to allow me to basically, you see right there, lift it off the frame table and come back through with the arms right here and just slowly cut them one at a time till they fall off. Then I'll come back through with a grinder and some belt sanders and just ease into it. What we don't want to use the plasma cutter here or anything that we could, one, burn our epoxy off that we just got, and two, be damaging surfaces that we spent a lot of time to prep and scratch up where we have to come back through and weld it. The bottom of this car looks really good. It's not show quality, but we want to keep it where we don't have to put a bunch more work back into it. So if you remember from our previous videos, this was the frame table with the original frame on the car we initially set the car on, and we are going to use this at our build platform. So what we're going to do, I left the body mounts back on the frame just like they were, rolled it over to the side when we put the car in rotisserie, and we're going to just drop the car right back on the frame table, align it. What's nice about the wheels, this jig's a little bit heavier. It was sticking too far forward out my lift door since I didn't have the car balanced with the weight, as far as there's no front end on the car. So open the shop door a little bit, move the jig forward, got all the body mounts lined up, and then we'll go ahead and tighten them. Once everything is in loose, you see I'm kind of just lowering it slow where I can get the bolts in and still move it. But then once I get all the bolts in, we'll go ahead and cinch everything down, and we'll close out this video for some final thoughts.
All right, so we're gonna wrap up the video. You see, we have the car tightened down to the frame jig again. It's solid, everything's good. We'll actually level it out, and we're gonna start on the next video, the second round of cut down. Now that we know we don't have to move it anymore and the frame jig will support it. So that's gonna consist of removing the wheel houses. And again, I need to go over with the owner exactly what we're gonna do about the certain rust areas and everything. I'm assuming the car is gonna need a lower cowl panel and 2 side cowl pieces. On the flip side though, I think we're gonna see if we can find just some trunk patches. I don't think, initially I was thinking about doing the whole trunk, and that's why I went ahead and blasted the thing, but realistically the trunk looks pretty good. I think the owner's gonna come down because he's got another set of doors, because I don't know if you remember in the intro video, these doors were caked full of filler. I haven't even messed with them yet. He asked me to hold off because I believe he found a better set. So when he delivers those doors, he'll come around and put his hands on it, look at this thing, and just see where we're at. So walking around this car now coming out of the paint booth on the rotisserie, you could see we did coat everything with 2 coats of epoxy primer. It really gives a good base for the car. I talked to the owner and asked him what color would be, for that black cherry, a darker color. So he chose the black epoxy. Another good thing is a lot of the chassis will be black. So when we do put a chassis paint on it, there'll be black primer underneath just in case there's a spot that's missed and everything else. But like I said, certain areas on the car, we also put the weld through primer. We know we're gonna have to weld certain areas like that. It's just easier than cleaning it up. If there's 1 or 2 spots we missed, we'll clean those areas up. But all in all, I just tried to go ahead and just make it easier, because removing the epoxy really gums up the sandpaper and everything else. So again, these are steps that just save a little bit of time, effort, and money on expendables down the road. So we will also remove these door jambs. They were support area that was holding the car. Again, we're gonna do another video on the second round of cut down. It'll probably be a real short one, and then we're gonna determine what we're gonna do. I need to inventory some of the parts. I know there are some floor patching upstairs, and again, we've had a couple cars come and go, so I just got to remember what parts were for this car. Everything's labeled in a section. So I hope you enjoyed it. This video on the sandblasting was a little different than some of the videos we do where we rip apart the whole entire car and there's no floor, there's no roof and everything else, and we just blast away. Saying that, this car did take a little bit longer to blast with the floor pan and everything else on the inner structure. I think the rotisserie was key to making the job efficient and just making the job come out a lot better. Like I said, you've seen the car in the bare metal stage. Now everything doesn't lie. And realistically, this is one of the nicer cars that have been in this shop in quite a while. So again, thanks for sticking along for this video. I hope it helped you out. If you're thinking about considering sandblasting, chemical dipping, or whatever you gotta do, please check out my Facebook page, Carthage Classic Cars. If you like this kind of stuff, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. And we'll see you on the next video.